Hello and welcome to Flutzes and Waxels, a figure skating podcast to satisfy all of your skating news, analysis, and recap needs. I'm Mary Margaret Mertzos.
And I'm Alicia Mertzos, and we're sisters with a lifelong love for figure skating, practicing, watching, and discussing. And this week, we have a special guest.
Yes, it is the off season, so we're doing something a little bit new.
You probably know him as the Skating Music Guy on Twitter.
Yes.
Hello, yes.
Welcome. Thanks for joining us.
And
Thank
this
you
is
very
Rob
much.
Colling, if you don't know him.
Yep.
Hello,
And again,
yes, everybody.
the Skating Music Guy on Twitter. And obviously, a lot of people ask us about the intricacies of ice dance, and we have really been wanting for a while to discuss, especially the music side of things, and who better than, a guy who styles himself the Skating Music Guy.
Yeah.
I did kind of set myself up for that one, didn't I?
Yeah, so why don't you, maybe tell the audience a little bit about yourself and maybe how you got into doing music for skating programs.
Okie dokie. Well, I've been a musician for decades and decades, and sound engineer and goodness knows what else. But like most people who are musicians or sound engineers and a whole lot else, I wasn't really using it because who
It's
does?
a tough field.
But my daughter is a skater, and I'd been editing her music, and some of her friends wanted theirs done, and before you knew it, I was doing music for the whole club, and then one thing leads to another, and I just decided, well, actually I really like this is good fun, and I turned out to be not too bad at it. So I just thought, well, here I am in the middle of a forest in Finland, and I need something. I need a job that I can do from my house without necessarily being able to go out, and because it's not like there's a whole lot of jobs here in the middle of the forest in Finland. So I thought, well, actually, this is working out quite well. Maybe I'll try and have a go at this. And what you now see on on Twitter and on the web and stuff is the result. So
Yeah,
it's good.
And for those who don't know, you have done, some sort of high-level programs. You've worked with, for example, Coombs and Buckland, Gillies and
Vivica
Poirier.
Lindfors.
And if you're wanting to check out the website, I believe it's...
Rob, you want to supply us with the website? We've got it pulled up.
Yeah, there's too many tabs.
theskatingmusicguy.com. I found it.
That's the one, skatingmusicguy.com. Yeah, all my collected nonsense is on there. But yeah, it's quite nice. It's taken off surprisingly quickly, really, because in the first year, I thought I was going to have to persuade a lot of people. I thought I was going to have to go out there and go, well, you know what, you should really get a music editor. But it turns out there were actually some people out there who did want a music editor and couldn't find one. So it was quite nice.
Those are our people.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. There were people we don't have to convince. Oh, sorry, I'm just throwing things around here. There were people we don't have to convince of the need, which is quite nice. Yeah, just a few anyway.
I know for me, I definitely really notice, when it's clear that somebody's used a professional music editor for a program. There are definitely some, and I'm sure you know more than anyone, you come across programs that have been a little butchered.
You can hear when they've done it themselves on their computer.
Yeah.
As someone who probably doesn't know a whole lot about music.
Oh boy, yes. Yeah, I have sat in so many competitions and kind of, done the kind of wincing, twitching thing in my seat. Oh boy. But I actually, you probably remember this, but I used to do live tweets of major skating events. Essentially sort of dissing the music edits for comic effect. But I've kind of stopped. Well, I've stopped doing it because, firstly, because I've actually started working with some of the people I was watching on the TV, but secondly, also because, even when it is making me wince, somebody somewhere has still tried,
Yeah.
So
Well,
I think
in
it was a bit nasty.
Yeah. I think in a lot of ways, with modern technology, it's easy for the layperson to sort of just play around with things and make a mix that sounds okay. And a lot of people can do that. But I do think, even if you're reading through Rob's bio and things on his website, you'll hear things about, honestly, the most interesting thing to me was doing some work with sort of the physics and acoustics of recording in an arena, because if you've ever been in an arena, it's very different from...
Like when we lament the choice of using primarily violin music because it sounds awful over arena speakers. It sounds fine on a good speaker system, but arenas don't have good speakers.
Yes. Oh boy, I remember being at, where was it? It was Worlds in Helsinki, I think, 2017. And I was sitting there in the Hartwall Arena, and it was amusing to me to watch an entire audience, 18,000 people or so, all like cringe when Carolina Costner started and the violin music came on. The whole was it violin or opera? It might have been an opera type one with a soprano vocal.
I think wasn't it Celine Dion? I think that was the year with her Celine program.
It might have been. Yeah, Celine is a choice over arena speakers. You have to be particular.
Oh, don't get me started on Celine Dion. That's not. It's early in the program yet. You know, we can't descend into random naughty words.
Worlds are going to be in Canada. Get ready for the Michael Bublé and the Celine Dion. Prepare yourself.
There's going to be a lot of that.
I need to mentally prepare myself for that. Yeah.
So for something like that, like, is there, whether or not someone hires you, obviously, I'm sure you'd like, people to come to you with these things, but are there ways other than just choice of music to deal with, types of music that might not sound quite so amazing on arena speakers?
Yeah, it's a very, it's quite a complicated set of decisions that you have to make. And obviously I wouldn't expect everybody to be informed enough to make them, but there are certain sort of key things that you can do. One of them being use the best quality recording that you possibly can. So if you can get it off a CD, do so. If you can't get it off a CD, download it properly and legally and stuff from iTunes, because that'll be a decent quality MP3.
Okay.
And then don't make MP3 copies of the MP3.
Yeah. Do you find often that people are doing that?
Oh boy. And you can completely hear it as well. I mean, a lot of people would say, well, you can't hear the difference because an MP3 sounds very, very similar to a CD copy. But in fact, what's happening behind the scenes, the MP3 algorithm is super clever. And it keeps all the most important bits of the music, but it's actually throwing away 90% of the data that's in the music relative to a CD copy. An MP3 only contains 10% as much data, and then if you encode that to an MP3 again, you've only got 1% of the original data. So, God, and yeah, I mean, again, I would say Tursun Bayeva's one at Helsinki 17 was really obvious, I think, to everybody in the arena, that it had been MP3'd and MP3'd and MP3'd, and she'd whoever had prepared that music had done, several conversions on it, and it sounded like someone was hand cranking a gramophone or something. It was dreadful.
Well, I mean, at least that makes it, for any skaters listening, and I know we have at least a few, at least to know, just start with the CD, don't make a ton of copies, and that'll certainly help you.
Or buy it on iTunes.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's well on the way. Another thing I would say is that it's a lot is to do with the type of music and the style. There's a musical tool that we use called compression, audio compression, which is basically a way to make the difference between the loudest bits and the quietest bits smaller.
Yeah.
And you need a certain amount of that in a rink, because it's very easy for the very quiet bits to just get lost.
Yeah.
And I think we've probably all seen programs where the quiet bits just vanish into the rafters and the skater just loses time. It's very hard to stay in time when you can't hear the beat. So you do need a certain amount of...
Or the rink tech blasts the music because they can't hear it, and then the louder part comes in and everybody goes deaf.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes, the Pink Panther theme is brilliant for that. If you turn it up so that kind of at the beginning is loud enough, then as soon as you get the saxophone in, it's kind of, oh my God, I've got a new parting in my hair. So you do need a certain amount of compression, but some styles of music use lots and lots and lots of compression because it's mainly designed to be listened to on little earbuds or in the car or on the radio in the kitchen or whatever. And so either end of the spectrum is no good. If you have not enough compression, like classical music, then you can end up with like the habanera from Carmen, where the quiet bits are really quiet. They're only just not room noise. And then when you get the sort of ba bum bum bum, you basically destroy the ice hole. But at the other end of the spectrum is something like Two Steps from Hell, or Metallica's Black Album is very famous for having a huge amount of compression and limiting on it, so that the dynamic range, the difference between the loud and quiet, was, I think, amongst the smallest it's ever been in recorded music on that album. And you can't listen to it on a Rinc system. It's just awful. It turns into a wash of noise because you need a certain amount of space in the music. You need there to be spaces between the loud bits for the echo, for the reverb to die away, because the reverb in an ice hole can be 8 or 10 seconds. It's enormous. It's like a cathedral. So yeah, I mean, I'm sure we've all thought, oh, this piece of music sounds great in an ice hole, and conversely thought, oh, this piece of music sounds dreadful in an ice hole. And it's just a case of making a mental note, and thinking, oh, okay, well, I won't try and play metal in an ice hall, or or sort of super radio friendly pop is quite difficult sometimes, especially if it's something a little bit thrashy.
Yeah.
If it's like sort of Justin Timberlake or something, you might get away with it because there's a little bit of space there. He sort of puts a bit of space in for funkiness. But when you have something that's got a little bit more of a thrashy guitar kind of feel to it, Christina Aguilera or something, where it's like everything turned up to 11, then that doesn't work so well. It's not so pretty.
Definitely a good thing for skaters to consider, I think, is how it goes in the arena. And I think the other one, at least to a lay person, that people, it can be very obvious, is when you're transitioning either between songs or between, parts of a specific piece. And we've seen that go very badly.
My favorite, I'm sorry, is Karen Chen's Les Mis program, Still I Say.
And then, da-da-da.
Yeah.
Still I say what, Karen? Still I say what?
I remember that one. It did make me cry a little.
That's my favorite example of like the really weird, awkward music cut that didn't need to happen. Yes.
It sometimes they happen for time. Somebody will go, okay, well, we've only got we're a second over or something, so we'll just shorten that a little bit and just drag it in. Oh boy. And so often people fade one piece out and fade another piece in.
Yeah.
But they don't take the time to line up the two pieces so that they're in time with each other. What if I'm doing a crossfade, it's called, where one fades out and the other fades in. The most important thing in a crossfade is making sure that the two pieces are bang in time before you start. You just need to find a drum or something, find a snare, or whatever it is, start of a bar, and you line them up. You make sure that they're in time with each other, and then when you fade from one into the other, no one will notice. But if you fade in and it's kind of and they're sort of, I don't know, you get like double drum hits and all sorts of horrible little indicators that it wasn't in time, and that affects the skater, because it's important to have a beat to skate to. And if every time you edit something the beat just slightly shifts, it becomes very hard to put together like a coherent piece of art to that piece of music, so
well, and that's,
I mean, I suppose that's my thing, really, is that because there are lots of other editors out there who know a lot more than I do about actually skating and can sequence music better than I can, or choose music better than I can. But the thing I really kind of get a bee in my bonnet about is trying to make all the joins as so unobtrusive that the whole thing starts to feel like one piece of music. Because I think if you have a coherent piece of music, you can then create a coherent, skating program, and it becomes artistically valuable rather than just technically high scoring. It's
well, and I know we talk about a lot for us that it can be very distracting. I want to be thinking about, the skating as opposed to thinking about, oh, that was an awkward music cut right there.
Yeah, because you can bet your boots the judges are thinking the same thing.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes.
There's a huge clunk in the middle of the music. They'll
Yeah.
be going, oh, ooh, and they won't be looking at whatever you're doing on the ice.
Yep.
Well, and particularly
So,
if you're skating to like a war horse or a piece of really popular music, the judges know what's supposed to come next. And so, again, with like
Yes.
that Les Mis piece, it's like, well, I know what the next lyric is, but where's the next lyric? And so you're thinking about that lyric
Yes.
rather than what she's doing on the ice.
Which, if I recall, was a beautiful spiral, and
Yep,
yet I would
it
always
was.
think, but
still I say what, Karen?
Exactly. I'd put Zagitova's programs this year, in fact, both of them
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
year, into that category as well. I found them very, very distracting. I mean, she's such a good skater, and I really wanted to get lost in her skating, but I just couldn't because they hacked the intro off the habanera and stuffed it at the end, or because they were trying to tell the story of Phantom in the wrong order.
Yeah.
In
with,
2.5
you know,
minutes.
yeah, with like, stuff smashing into other stuff, and he was kind of, oh God, you've just given her a bag of spanners and asked her to make a program out of it. It's tough. It's
yeah.
tough.
Well, and as hard as it is for singles and pairs, the ice dance is
A special beast.
yes. And
Yes.
we've been doing a lot of work. We'll be doing another separate episode talking about
Yes.
the technical side of ice dance, but a huge part of ice dance, especially, for literally half the competition, is that rhythm dance, which is extremely restrictive in terms of timing, beats per minute.
And even more restrictive than usual this season.
Yes.
Because we tried to do an original dance and then they realized everybody was mad about you cutting the pattern. And
Yeah.
so we have an original dance with a pattern.
Yeah,
Yes,
which-
is interesting, isn't it? Or half a pattern.
Yeah.
Yes.
I should just mention for anybody who's less familiar with sort of the history of ice dance, we used to have the compulsory dance, which was just, like, for example, the fin step. You would do only that. And then we would have a second program, the original dance, which would be, say, Broadway themed, but you can do whatever you like with that
Yes.
theme. And then the free dance, which is open to do whatever you like.
Which is basically still what the free dance is now.
Yeah.
So when they switched from 3 programs to 2, they smushed the compulsory and the original dance into one program. And we've kind of smushed even more than we used to by throwing in the theme as well as the compulsory pattern.
Yeah, so for those who haven't read through the ISU documents, the seniors and juniors both have to skate to a program from Broadway musical or an operetta, and they also have to have a particular pattern. For the juniors, it's the tea time foxtrot, and for the seniors, it's the fin step. So we've been trying to make up some lists of
Yes.
music choices that fit those themes, and I certainly have a newfound respect for just how difficult it is.
Yes. Oh man, it was so hard trying to come up with even just a few, especially when we were
Yeah.
starting to
Yeah.
come up with ideas, like
It is a hard one. It is a
Yeah.
hard one.
particularly
Just-
because they are so slow this year.
Well, in terms of beats per
Yeah.
minute, it's
Yes.
I believe 108 and 104.
108
are the
and
two.
104, yeah.
Yeah, and 108, I mean, I'm not a ballroom dancer, so I don't know these things. I did ballroom dancing for about 6 weeks in 1993. And that was mainly just to meet a hot girl, to be honest. But it kind of worked because she's my wife now. But
Well, there we
hi,
go.
hi, Rach, if you're listening. So I don't know much about ballroom dancing. But what I think, if I'm right, this is the tempo of the foxtrot this year is what might be called a slow fox.
Yeah,
Yes.
Rather
exactly.
than an ordinary foxtrot. It's not like in the middle of the foxtrot tempo range. It's right at the bottom of the
Yeah,
foxtrot tempo
I
Yeah.
was
range.
doing
So it's
some
very
research
hard
on
to
that as
find.
well, and everything seems to suggest that a foxtrot is technically about 130 beats per minute.
Yeah, 120 to
Can be,
130.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's-
At least for the most common
Yeah.
foxtrots.
If you're entering...
Should we do a little? No, should we do a little like spotter's guide to a foxtrot for those skaters who are listening and might actually want to try and find one? Do we want to
Yeah,
try
sure.
and like do the anatomy of one?
That
Sure,
sounds
yeah.
great.
Because I think if I'm right, a foxtrot it's usually in swing time, dun, 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 rather than straight time. Dun, 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 dun.
Yeah.
And the golden thing that makes you think, aha, it's a foxtrot, is if you can line up that classic cymbal pattern, against it, then you can start thinking, oh, well, maybe it is a foxtrot.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting for us, we're sort of come at it more from, skating first and, music and things second, that when you're skating a quick step versus a foxtrot, they're the same, style of steps, just the quick step is obviously double time to the foxtrot.
Yes.
And so for
me...
Well,
that was something, yeah.
So for me,
I was
when
going to
I
mention
think
that
about,
because I think the ISU's been a little bit... misleading this year in saying 104 and 108 because it's actually not 104 that we need, is it? It's actually 208.
Yeah, exactly.
For the quick step. And I guess the way to think about that is if you're thinking about a beat in terms of like you could think of it like as a kick drum and a snare drum, so you'd have a sort of boom tss, boom tick kind of feel to most beats. And if you're doing a foxtrot, then it's kind of every other beat is your kick drum. Every other beat is your boom. Boom, t, boom, t, boom, t. Whereas if you're doing a quick step, every beat is the boom, isn't it? It's sort of bumps, 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 bumps. Well, it's not that because that's some kind of Belgian techno.
Yeah.
But sort of bump, t, 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 ba-dum, t, 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 and you've got that sort of boom, 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 boom feel on every beat. The snares are twice as fast and they're all in between. It's also, technically, it's to do with where your swing is. Swing means a triplet. It means three things fit in instead of two. And on the foxtrot, your triplet fits in between the beats. And in the quick step, if we're saying it's 104 BPM, you actually are fitting it between the eighth beats, not between the four beats. That's a very that's such a technical explanation, and I'm sure about 4 of your listeners found it valuable.
Well, I think it's good to have that that base, especially if people aren't don't have a music background but also are less familiar with skating these pattern dances. I'm sure that's just utterly confusing and makes no sense whatsoever.
Well, and the other problem is that the ISU doesn't really provide any clarification on what they expect in terms of a foxtrot or a quick step. They just say a quick step at 104 beats per minute, and you go, okay, but it also has to be Broadway. What does that mean?
Well, or in this case this year, it can be quick step, Charleston, or swing.
Yeah.
Which swing in the traditional sense versus the ISU sense are not necessarily the same thing. The ISU has a very broad definition of swing.
My favorite thing was during that coaches meeting when one of the ISU reps said something about swing, and he goes, and that opens the door to things like rock and roll. And I went, wait, what?
See, this is why I totally understand when people are utterly baffled by ice dance, because in a lot of ways it doesn't really make a lot of sense. And it does make it really, really hard for skaters and coaching teams to even just figure out, well, so what do I skate to then?
And they wind up going with the safe choice because you don't want to pick something that you would classify as swing in the ISU definition that the referee then says, no, that's not swing. Yeah. There's your deduction for the entire season.
Well, and then you have to
change your program, and it's a disaster.
So
this is why we ended up with a very conservative season of tangos last year. I had lists and lists of really cool, weird alternative tangos, and everyone came to me with something with a bandonion on it that mainly Libertango, to be honest. Let's be honest, but. Lots and lots of Piazzolla. And I think when the ISU doesn't give out sort of detailed guidelines about what is and isn't acceptable, that is the natural thing to do, really, isn't it? It's just to go very conservative.
I know we've seen 3 official announcements of what people are doing for the rhythm dance so far. And I believe it's been Mamma Mia, Chicago,
and Greece,
which... Mamma Mia's maybe a tiny bit unique in terms of ice dance, which is a bit sad to say, but I kind of unfortunately expect
a lot of Fred and Ginger.
Yeah, a lot of that sort of 30s style swing.
Which is great, as long as we don't have 70 of them.
Yeah,
Yes.
And so
that's always the issue.
Yeah, I'll just mention now we have been coming up with lists of pieces of music that fit.
As you are listening, they will be available on our Spotify, and they'll be constantly updated as we come up with more ideas.
Yeah, basically we started this ages ago before the ISU decided to change their minds about having a senior pattern, and so we've had to do all this work again. But we're trying to come up with unique ideas for different things. It's hard
to, because you then have to go through each soundtrack and go, well, is there something in this musical? You know, I love the musical, but does it contain a quick step stroke foxtrot?
Yeah. And is it the right tempo?
Well, that's the thing. I've come across especially a lot of quick steps where I thought, oh, that would be great. And then you go to the tempo and go, no, that's like a 134 or something. So
exactly. There's a whole lot of foxtrots at sort of... And this is something I'm finding, is that people will look on list sites, or they will use Google or use YouTube or whatever they use for searching foxtrots, and they'll find a foxtrot, and they'll even find a foxtrot from a musical. But then they'll come to me and say, well, can we slow this down to the right tempo? And it's at like 140, and I'm kind of going, well,
you can,
yes, we can,
but then we get that cell block tango that we got a few times this year.
Oh, don't, no! I get horrible flashbacks at the mere mention. Yeah, there's so many juniors had that last year, which meant it was at like 90-something, which, boy.
Makes it really painful to sit through, especially since, again, like everybody knows these really famous songs, and when you slow it down so dramatically, it's extremely noticeable.
Mary and I were chatting this week about an example of, in our childhoods, of musical songs that are slowed down far too much, and it was a foxtrot, and it's the song One from a chorus line. And so when you're doing your compulsory patterns, the Keats Foxtrot, the ISU music for it is that song, but it is slowed down by like a third.
Like it is unbelievably slow and laggy, and we had to do that dance so many times because it's a competitive dance that you compete for occasionally years at a time.
The entire time you're at that level, you compete that dance
to that music.
To that
you
music.
Have to use that music
for like 4 or 5 seasons sometimes. And
I have newfound respect for your toughness.
I don't know if you've ever checked out. Well, but at the very least, Skate Canada provides these CDs, and I assume the ISU has them as well. But they're the required music for each of the pattern dances, and most of them are pretty terrible, and usually an issue of being just utterly slowed down or sped up to fit this specific beat that needs to have.
Rather than finding music that fits, which can also be kind of a disaster. If you go to like a social ice dance event, one of our favorites is one of the tangos is done to Superstition.
Stevie Wonder's Superstition.
Really?
Yes, really.
Really?
The tempo fits perfectly, but the tone of it is just the strangest thing.
Yeah. Okay. What?
Believe me, the first time
accents are all the...
I mean, to be fair, like again, in terms of there's a lot of knee action, knee bend, and it does go well with the bass line. Like you can do this tango to Superstition, but it just feels utterly weird.
Once you wrap your brain around it, it does actually work pretty well. But it takes a while to wrap your brain around, wait, I'm doing a tango to Superstition? What?
Awesome. Awesome. Yes, tangos with the funk. I like it.
Yeah, so that's the sort of thing that I imagine we're going to be navigating this season of, well, I guess it technically fits, but that's a weird choice tonally.
Yeah.
There's going to be a lot of that, I think. And also we're going to suffer from these tempo changes because the groove of these things changes so much. There's a difference between having a piece that's normally at 130 and having a band re-record it at 110.
Yeah.
That kind of makes sense and it feels okay. But when you have somebody like a recording that's at 130 and you slow it down to 108, suddenly the differences in timing between what the instrumentalists played and what's actually the beat, which were minuscule at 130, become noticeably massive at 108, and you start thinking, oh God, these guys couldn't play for toffee. You know? What on earth? You know, the whole thing starts falling apart and sounding like it's embedded in treacle. So, I suppose that would be another piece of advice, would be, if anybody's looking at these things, don't just sort of go for the first thing you find, because you might find a foxtrot that's at the wrong tempo and go, oh, okay, it's a foxtrot and it's from a musical I like, let's do it. Spend the extra few days, keep looking, and try and find something that's a little closer, because my life will be easier. Let's put it that way.
Now, obviously, slowing things down can be a big issue, and that seems to be what a lot of people do. Occasionally you see people speeding them up instead. Now, obviously that comes up with different issues, and you don't want it to turn into, the chipmunks.
Mush.
But
no.
Is there like a certain range at which you can play around with the BPM where you don't really notice the issue so much?
It's if you're doing it the old-fashioned way of literally just speeding up the whole recording, then it's really a very, very small tolerance. Just a few BPM is enough to bring in the chipmunks.
Yeah.
Come on in, chipmunks. But these days, most editing packages have the ability to time stretch things or time compress things without altering the pitch.
Okay.
So yeah, you can get away with a lot more. And I have had clients come to me and say we want it 30 odd BPM slower, and I have been able to do it. And it sounds a bit off because the musicians do sound like they're doing the wading through treacle thing. But to a casual listen, it's not completely awful. I think much beyond, I would say 20 or 30 BPM is kind of the limit at which, beyond that point, it's nonsense. If you're speeding up, actually, it's a bit more tolerant. Speeding up tightens those gaps and makes everybody seem like they were playing much tighter and much more accurately. And so you can speed things up by a bit more, and it still sounds okay. I mean, we're back to the problem of war horses. If you speed up something everybody knows, then it's going to sound completely, round the twist really quickly. But generally speaking, 5 or 10 BPM, you're going to get away with, no problem, with modern technology. Probably around the 5 BPM mark, people won't be able to notice even up to there most of the time. But yeah, when you get to sort of 20-ish, you need to start thinking carefully about, is this something I really want to do? Yeah. Is there a better option?
Have I picked an obscure enough thing that I'm going to get away with this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think
sometimes it works. If it's something with a programmed beat on it, sometimes you can get away with that a little bit better because obviously that's tighter. That's got no inaccuracies in the timing, and so even when you slow it down, it's still super accurate timing. If you slow down something that's meant to be disco until it's hip hop, then people will obviously notice. But generally speaking, you can get away with a lot.
The one thing that I've always, I understand why, because obviously it's a huge expense and I'm sure for most people prohibitive, but we do occasionally have, skaters doing or commissioning rather recordings of a song. Like we know Gilles and Poirier, obviously they work to do a cover. Obviously, again, it's prohibitively expensive and that's why we don't see it. But from a musician point of view, like would it be an option if you were willing to have that expense to sort of commission your own?
Assuming you have unlimited funds from your federation, should you go and get it recorded yourself?
Yeah, definitely. But I would say though that I don't think there are many feds left in the world who are actually providing that kind of level of funding. I think the reason that Piper and Paul were able to afford it was that they weren't hiring in an orchestra. They were hiring two guys who happen to be super talented guys and can produce an ice rink filling noise just with the two of them. But as soon as you start going, well, I'd like the Foxtrot from The Sound of Music re-recording, with full chorus. It's not going to happen.
Which is a bit unfortunate, but at least the one good thing is that in terms of Broadway, usually there are so many, new cast
different
albums
versions
that that helps a little bit, even to mix and match.
It really does.
Particularly
every revival, there's a new recording to get your teeth into, and usually the quality improves each time as well.
And particularly if you're working with something that's slightly off and say you, for whatever reason, can't afford to hire a music editor. I actually found this when we were looking through music. We picked some music from How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying. And the original cast recording was the perfect tempo for the fin step.
Yeah.
And the updated cast recording was slightly too fast. So you can actually check between different cast recordings. Let's say you're a big Daniel Radcliffe fan, you want to skate to How to Succeed in Business, but you can't afford the music editor. Well, you can use the old version of that song without having to change anything.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes you can use that trick to get around some of the acoustic problems that some of these things have as well. Because sometimes you find, let's take Les Mis as an example. I've researched 15 different versions of Les Mis a couple of years ago for one of my clients who wanted a Les Mis program. And some of them are, there's like synthesizers in there and stuff, and it's all a bit 80s. And when you put that in the rink, because they didn't, there's a number of problems actually with musical shows ending up on record. Because they don't usually go to the theatre and record it. They usually get the cast into a recording studio and do it. And you need a really good recording studio with really good engineers to be able to capture a theatre cast. Because they're not the same as a normal singer or band or orchestra who are used to performing 6 inches from a microphone.
Yeah.
If you're on stage, you're used to projecting to the back of the to the back of the room. And so your voice is a colossal beast for a recording studio to handle, And you end up with a lot of recordings, particularly from before about 2000, where they haven't really got to grips with that. And you have this recording where the voices are really loud, or some tones in the voices are really loud, and what's backing them up is kind of a little bit anemic. And you end up with these things that when you put them in the ice rink, we're back to that Carolina Costner thing of it just irritates the hell out of everybody's ears when you listen to these things. So, but you can get around that by going for a more recent one, because I would say, generally speaking, not always, but generally speaking, the more recent a cast recording is, the better the technology, the better the knowledge that has gone into recording it. And certainly some stuff like the new Anastasia soundtrack is absolutely beautiful. It's actually much nicer than the film one.
Yeah.
Because we've had 20 years of technological advances, and they just knew better how to record it. And I think also, what's her name, Christy
Altamar.
Altamar, yes.
Alicia's a
she
big fan.
seems to be.
I just flew to New York to go see it, so
I thought I could rely on you, Alice, here to be able to come forth with the name. There's a new crop of singers coming through now who can do both, who can do studio singing and stage singing, because they've trained for both. But
that's actually a really good example, because the cast recording does really get across everything that they were able to do on stage. It really is much more comparable than a lot of other shows we've seen, where the cast recording sounds completely different than the stage production.
Yes, that's another issue. Yeah, and there was a phase in the when was it? Around sort of the 50s and 60s. A lot of the shows from that time, they created the studio recording by making the cast sing it in the normal way, but then just applying like a blanket reverb to the whole thing. It's really strange. If you listen to the soundtracks to just two that have come up in my line of work in the last month or so, On the Town is astonishing. The film soundtrack for On the Town, there's just reverb all over everything. It's like, what the hell were you doing? Now, a guy like me can take the reverb away, but generally speaking, it's almost unusable because it's so reverby, and ice halls are reverby anyway.
Yeah.
So, you're adding reverb on top of reverb, and it's going to be hard to make out the details in the beat.
Yeah, that is.
And the other one that struck me was the Jungle Book. Jungle Book is again, an odd one, because they really had no need to. They're perfectly good recordings. There's no need to just slap a load of reverb on them. But I think they just wanted it to sound a bit more polished on all those kind of, wood veneer front room entertainment centres in the 1960s.
Yeah, that is a bit of a hard thing. I know for me, I've been looking especially for the foxtrots to, like old Hollywood musicals. I love, old movies and things like, Fred Astaire and Gene Kelly. And then you listen to the soundtrack and you go, this is a great song, but in terms of playing it in a nice arena, I can't really imagine it sounding very good.
Yeah. There's a lot of struggles with that sort of thing.
Yeah, the older you go, especially.
Absolutely, the older you go. But there are things you can do. Again, possibly not something that you could do if you weren't experienced at using a music editing package. But if you have a bit of experience with those things, you can sometimes put other things on there. I mean, a lot of my line of work these days seems to be adding instruments to existing recordings, along the lines of what I did for Smart and Diaz last year, where that was a hopelessly illegal piece of music. and we turned it into something that satisfied all the ISU rules just.
And it sounded great.
Yeah, I do imagine that's a lot of work, though, for you to, recording new.
That one in particular, because the tempo wasn't steady. But at least with a lot of the old school foxtrots, the tempo is steady, and it's just that the drum beat is kind of some muffly thing in the background. But if you've got a steady tempo, you can put a programmed drum beat on there, or some kind of percussion loop or something on there, even just a hi-hat on the offbeats. And it sort of sells it more as a, there is a pulse under this, there is a beat, there is an audible rhythm, as the ISU puts it.
Yeah. Well, and then
off you go.
Yeah, that is an important consideration as well, is that you have to be able to hear the beat in ice dance, and it has to be consistent. Do you find that you do have to add in that sort of backbeat to just about all ice dance programs, or?
It's becoming nearly all, not. I would say, it's probably half and half. I think all ice dance programs that are coming through now, I'm actually having to retime in some way, just so that, because the tolerance for the pattern dance is becoming so small. In terms of the tempos, I mean, we're getting tempo violations even where there weren't any tempo violations, just because judges have a sort of itchy thumb sometimes, and they're very, very keen to. Or it's referees, actually, isn't it, that do the tempo violations? But
it's the referee.
Yeah.
The referee doesn't do much, so they like to jump on the opportunity to do things.
Stop the program in the event of birds.
Yes.
Or award tempo violations. So a lot of almost all, I would say, of the pattern dances that come my way now, I am sort of routinely adjusting the timing so that they're bang in for the entire pattern dance, so that it's against a machine generated structure of bars. But the nice thing about that, though, is that once you've done that, you can then create a little discrete percussion loop or something and just copy it over all the bars, because it just makes things a little easier, rather than trying to time it in against something that is irregular. Trying to place something against an irregular template, it's rather harder. I have done that too sometimes, and that proves to be quite difficult also. In fact, that Smart and Diaz one is a good example of that. That had no underlying template at all. I just lined it all up against the music, and oh my God, it was so good.
Well, and I imagine that's something we're going to see a lot of this season, because Broadway music is kind of notorious for like weird tempo and key changes, and like the number of times, I only played in an orchestra in a musical a couple times, but the number of times you have one bar that's in 7/8 and the rest of it's in 4/4, and you just go, what are you doing?
Just making lives difficult for everybody.
Exactly. That's just, it's just Bernstein. It's just what happens.
Just one bar in 7/8. It's fine.
It's going to be tricky, isn't it?
Never mind the dialogue cut-ins, which is something we're going to have to navigate this season, because music in musicals is a storytelling mechanism, and so sometimes the lyrics don't work. You've got to cut in with dialogue, and we've got to cut those out to make it fit the ISU rules.
Especially it seems in...
And to make it fit my personal standards of damn it, no spoken word. Maddie and Zach. No spoken word.
We appreciate that.
Yes.
We're not big fans of the spoken word, but
yeah, it'll be interesting to see how teams handle it, and especially how many teams, just try and go pure, like just only I want to do this soundtrack of this particular musical, or if we're just getting
weird
random
medleys.
pieces. We did actually, very recently, there was a short dance with the Finstep in it that was most famously the 2013-2014 Olympic season. And so we have seen what teams have done with this before, not with the Broadway restriction, but there was a lot of choppy cutting and pasting. Yep. Here's two random songs and mush them together. I expect we'll probably see some of that at least.
Yeah.
On the topic of
fun,
music allowances, I do just want to mention as well, I don't really love that we're letting them do jukebox musicals. It's not my favorite allowance because we're going for this restricted option.
I mean, on the other hand, though, I think they need to open it up a little bit just so that we don't have 50 cabarets.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, no more Chicago, please.
Yeah, I unfortunately suspect we're going to have
quite a lot of Chicago's.
Chicago and cabaret.
I think we are.
Yeah.
Fortunately, though, I don't think you could make the Phantom of the Opera work.
I don't think so.
So
I don't hear a foxtrot in there.
Yeah.
No.
So we shouldn't hear any Phantoms. I don't think we'll get any Les Mises either.
Well, the only one, I haven't checked the BPM for it, but Master of the House is
sort
of
right.
quick steppy. I hope nobody goes that direction.
I hate to say it, but yeah, there are some Les Mis things. Yeah.
Oh no.
I will just say one thing I would definitely specifically like to request to all skaters. In that ISU coaches meeting, they played some examples of music. One of those was a quick step from the musical Peter Pan.
Ooh.
No, please don't. It is horribly, horribly racist, and I can't believe they played it. And just please, nobody skate to this. Please, please, please don't.
Consider the racial implications of your music choices,
it's
please.
A song by Tiger Lily in racist gibberish. And I'm just going, no, please don't.
Don't do this.
Nice. Well, I was thinking the same thing about a couple of other things, actually, because there's some in stuff like Song of the South. And even the Crow's song from Dumbo is like a half decent.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of, oh, God, please no.
Yeah, that is the thing. Just because it fits doesn't necessarily mean you should skate to it. Especially when we get into the juniors, I think being age appropriate is an important consideration.
Yes, you can. That doesn't mean you should.
Exactly.
Please.
Definitely.
And actually, we haven't really mentioned operetta at all, mainly just because that's not really our area of expertise.
No.
Well, you know what? Amongst my clients, no one else has. No one's mentioned it.
I wouldn't be surprised if we did see a few, like, Gilbert and Sullivan.
Yeah.
I think there are, quick steps and things in there that would work okay. Although, again, something like the Mikado, maybe let's think twice before we do it. Unless we're, Komatsubara and Coletto. That's like the only one maybe if you want to reclaim it. But,
Good point.
Yeah. The other thing on the track of operetta, if you are going to skate to operetta, please pick a good recording.
Well, yes.
Please.
Yes.
That's a very good point. The operetta is a bad one, actually. That was something else I was going to mention about the picking music so that it sounds good in the ice hole, because one of the worst things that musicals commonly do that makes it very, very hard to use in an ice hole is have those things like I'm trying to think of it now. Which is the musical that has the triptych in it where there are three singers singing at once, and they're all singing independent melodies at the same time? I can't remember, but a lot of the more modern musicals do it.
Yeah,
Wicked does it
that
a lot,
happens a lot.
and Anastasia does it a lot, where you
or
have
Sondheim.
yeah, lovely Sondheim. Yeah, Ghost the musical has a number of them as well, where you have lots and lots of melodies all over each other at once. And,
it doesn't work so well for...
Just steer clear of those.
I have a good example for that. It's one that people use all the time. One Day More. Why are you skating to One Day More?
As a single person or a pair, there's like 8 voices going on in the background.
What are you doing?
You can't cover them all.
you can do it, but you have to edit it really carefully.
Yes. Yeah.
And just Yeah, I did one recently, and as the guideline is, if you're using the movie one particularly, just take out everything that has Russell Crowe, and then you're fine.
Yeah.
Not because of Russell Crowe, but just because he's over all the parts that have many, many singers.
Yeah, another thing as well that, well, I notice more in English, since obviously I speak English and my language proficiency in other languages isn't as strong. But, you know, for those who maybe English isn't the first language, to just, you know, be aware of the lyrics as well.
Yeah.
And especially since, you know, for the lay person who's maybe not as, you know, maybe wouldn't be able to tell quite as easily if there's a weird music cut. If you've got a weird lyric cut, for those who speak the language, it's immediately noticeable. And another thing to just, you know, consider.
Get a music editor who speaks the language of the song that you're using is probably a good idea, because they're not going to make a terrible cut of the lyrics if they're any good.
Yes.
And also, I think it's also worth having somebody who is a native speaker cast an ear over it, just because sometimes little words get through, particularly in a more mature musical, you know, if you're looking at, like, you know, Dear Evan Hansen or the Book of Mormon or something that's a little bit more grown up, there's going to be some lyrics in there that you're not going to want in front of a family audience necessarily. So, I'm just thinking, I mean, even things like Chicago and Cabaret, you know, you have to be a little bit careful, especially if you are a novice or a junior team. I would almost say really that Cabaret and Chicago are almost never suitable.
Yeah, I would agree.
for a younger team.
Yeah.
Almost
There's
never.
another song that probably fits, that is not going to ever be on the list because it's going to fit for the juniors, and it is not really super junior age appropriate.
Which one was that? I'm blanking now. The
Big Spender.
Oh, yes.
It's
Yeah.
It's not really age appropriate. We let some kids get away with it, but they shouldn't.
Yeah.
And also, I'm sick of hearing it. I don't want to hear it anymore.
That seems fair. Well, I was going to say, actually, I mean, Sweet Charity is one of my all-time favorite musicals. I absolutely love it. But if you do love Big Spender, and if you do want to dance to that thing, then have a listen to the track on the Big Spender soundtrack called Rich Man's Frug, or Frug, because that basically is Big Spender, but reinterpreted as a kind of 60s Austin Powers go-go
Well, and
thing.
sans lyrics, which helps, you know.
Which
then
makes
can
it
say whatever.
age appropriate for the juniors.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Hell yes.
There are ways to do almost anything that you want to do, but we have to bear in mind that a lot of these kids are like 14 in the junior level.
Yeah.
And
it just makes it a little uncomfortable. We don't need to. There are, I think, enough, you know. Another thing that we've really been trying to do is find non-romantic music choices for either sibling teams or if you just don't want to go that route. And I think we found a few, not as many as I would have hoped, but, you know, we're working on it.
Musicals do that. The duets are mostly romantic, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, it's true. I'm getting slightly distracted here because what my brain has been doing in the background since you mentioned Phantom of the Opera not being suitable is that it's merrily playing a sort of, you know, in Phantom of the Opera as a foxtrot.
I mean,
God, the perils of having a musical brain, it just never stops.
If they edit it like that, I will give them a pass.
Yeah, I was about to say, if you have a really weird... I remember, and there were a few teams who did it, but back a few years ago when the juniors had the cha-cha as the required rhythm, and there was this weird song that I had never heard before and never since, and it was a Tom Jones cover of the Prince song Kiss. And it was the weirdest thing, but I was like, it works, and this is so weird that, okay, let's go with it.
Yes.
Was that not a big hit on your side of the Atlantic? It was a huge hit here. The Art of Noise, featuring Tom Jones. Yeah. It was #1 for weeks.
Apparently didn't make it over here, or maybe we're just too young. That's also entirely possible. But
I think, to be fair, you know, it would have caused violence on the streets to do something like that to a Prince song over there. But,
so we are fans, to be clear, for this season of picking weird things that fit the requirements for the ISU. Because there are weird things that you can make work. And
well, and
definitely.
You know, if you can stand out, you know,
it doesn't hurt.
exactly.
As long as you're standing out because your music is weird in a good way and not weird in a terrible, horrible way.
Or just inappropriate.
Yeah.
Maybe there's one question in that, though, which is, I mean, I know I've been finding foxtrots and you've been finding foxtrots and quick steps. How have you been doing that? If people out there are listening to this and thinking, how on earth do I go about this? Because I've Googled the word foxtrot, like I Googled the word tango last year and ended up with cell block tango because it came up in my Google results. You know, I've tried it and it's not easy.
Okay.
How do people
I actually found a really useful software piece online called, I think it's called TuneBat.
I believe that's what it's called. Yeah.
And they have an advanced search which allows you to put in albums and a tempo, and it will give you similar results at approximately that tempo.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
And, you know, it's not an exact science, obviously, but then at least it gives you suggestions and you can listen to and go, okay, that's a waltz, so obviously that doesn't work. But you know.
But that gives you a list to work with. So you throw in up to 5 albums. You pick your 5 favorite musicals, you stick them in, you put in either 104 or 108 beats per minute.
Or you can even do a range as well.
Yeah. And it will give you an idea of
here are some potentials.
Here are some things that are that make sense with those albums that are approximately that tempo, and then you can listen through them and pick out the ones that make sense.
Yeah, and obviously, you know, cool. For us, we're Broadway fans.
Yeah.
We have a, you know, like I know for me and my music library, I have lots of stuff for me. I've just been sort of listening to, you know, see if I come across something that works. Or even just things like at one point I went through a Wikipedia list of here's every, you know, movie musical produced in Hollywood by year, and just look through and go, okay, have I seen that? Is there anything that would work in that musical?
Yeah.
It you know, takes a lot of searching. It's certainly not easy. And again, I definitely have a newfound respect for how hard it is to find interesting things.
But as a skater, something you can do is use one of those. There are quite a few software things online that will tell you the tempo of whatever song.
Yeah.
If there's a musical that you like, throw it in, see if there's anything that's the right tempo, and then listen to it and try and figure out if it's a foxtrot or a quick step.
Yes.
Good luck. It's not easy.
There are a lot of like tap tempo things for the phone.
Yeah, I've been doing
and
that
I would
as well.
say every ice dancer needs one of those. I have one that's just, I think it's just literally called tap tempo. It's by a Finnish guy.
Yeah, I have that one as well, tap tempo.
Yeah, we've been using that as well.
It's good, isn't it? Yeah, it's quite good. It just doesn't do anything else fancy. It just does what it's supposed to do. But every ice dancer needs one of those on their phone, because you could be listening to something in the supermarket or on the car radio or whatever, and you know, you whip out your phone and go, oh, this sounds like it might be the right tempo. Dum, 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 dum. And oh no, it's 160. I can't possibly use that. But yeah, you need to definitely have something like that on tap. I would also say Spotify is incredibly useful for ice skaters and ice dancers, and I know it's paid for, and I don't know how you guys stand about recommending brands and products on your website, on your podcast here. But
our music lists are on Spotify, so, you know.
There's kind of an inherent endorsement of Spotify there. Although I do want to levy a criticism at Spotify, because if you go into their like browse genres folder, there is no musical one.
Yes, fix that, please.
There isn't, is
there?
No.
And because that was my plan. I pay for Spotify. I have no problem telling people that. So I was like, I'll just throw on the musical genre while I'm at work. And if something comes up, great, I'll write it down. There isn't one.
I will say, though, actually, I haven't used it in a while, and hopefully it still exists, but there used to be, it was a website called AccuRadio.
I forgot about AccuRadio.
Yeah, which had an excellent...
AccuRadio still exists.
Okay, good. Yeah, they have an excellent selection of Broadway, you know, and you can just listen to whatever random songs, and that's another good option.
They do.
Yeah.
One good way to use Spotify, though, there are 2 things I'd recommend. One being, find some stuff that does work, possibly even some stuff that ice dancers have used for foxtrots or quick steps previously, and assemble that into a playlist, and then use either the playlist radio or the recommendations that Spotify comes up with to extend your playlist. You know, create a kernel of things and then use Spotify's recommendation mechanisms to make it bigger. And the other thing is, sometimes people have done the work for you, because there's an awful lot of ballroom dancers out there who use Spotify, and they've created playlists with names like 113 BPM.
That's true, actually. I didn't even think to look in there, but that is an excellent suggestion.
And if you're a skater who's looking for them, guess what? as you're listening to this, our playlists are live. They are called Tea Time Foxtrot and Finstep.
Yes.
So
there we go.
You can...
And yes, and we're taking suggestions. If there are things that aren't on there, we will add them. Because I think this, again, it was an interesting sort of experiment for us. And, even if it's not us doing them, just having somebody online creating, lists of music choices, not just for these dances, but for all pattern dances for the future, I think would be a really great resource that, I don't know if I'm exactly the person to do it, but it would be nice if somebody had that somewhere.
Definitely.
Also, another tip for ice dancers, if your area has a local social ice dance group, I know that there's a bunch in North America. I don't know about anywhere else. Get in touch with them because they have lists of songs that work for different
like
patterns.
You can do Superstition for the Harris Tango.
And so you can get in contact with one of them and ask them, hey, can I get your social ice dance list? Because it might give you an insight into something else that might work that you would have never thought of, that this person has gone, oh, wait, that works.
Yep.
I don't want to skate the Keats Foxtrot to this awful version of One anymore. So here's another song that we can use.
Yep.
Good point.
Yeah,
Also, I guess that works for standard ballroom societies and ballroom get-togethers and ballroom, indeed, web pages and
there's
Spotify playlists and stuff.
There's lots of overlap.
It doesn't have to be ice dance.
Yeah, I think, the skating world in a lot of ways could serve to be more collaborative. And I don't think there's anything wrong. And, I work in libraries, and it's obviously a very collaborative environment where we share everything. Somebody's done the work before, so why would I do it again?
Absolutely. That's the way. Yeah. Yes. Oh, and just if you're Googling them, if anyone out there is thinking, well, I'm going to Google Foxtrot, I'm going to Google Quickstep, Google Slow Fox,
definitely.
one word, instead of Foxtrot, because Foxtrot's going to yield a bunch of stuff that's not the right time.
Yeah. Yes, it's all going to be way too fast.
Yes.
Yes. And if you're Googling Quicksteps, Google them at 208 BPM as well as 104.
Yes. Yeah. Because the ISU counts things in a very weird way.
The ISU is so weird.
Really do. Oh, we tried so many, with Nick and Penny and that short dance for the rumba, we were slightly at panic stations with that to begin with, because obviously the original dance was done to a piece at 105 BPM and the ISU said it had to be 172 to 180 BPM.
Wow.
What? And I mean that's drum and bass tempo.
Yeah.
That's dubstep.
Yeah.
What the hell were you supposed to do with that? So,
I do wonder a lot of times about the musical background of the people making these rules at the ISU.
I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that it's basically zero.
Or base level at the least.
Like took a music class in high school.
Yeah. I could be wrong, but...
Could be.
The way that they phrase things, again, swing, which opens the door to rock and roll. Like, that suggests to me that there's not a whole lot of musical background there.
It opens the door to rock and roll, waves cheerily, and says, hello in there, rock and roll, how are you doing?
I am intrigued to see if we will get any rock and
again.
roll short rhythm dances.
Yeah.
There's probably something that I haven't looked too much into the jukebox side.
There's probably something in Rock of Ages.
Yeah, there's some stuff. I was looking at there's some of the stuff like Buddy and Ray and $1 Million Quartet and jukebox musicals. I'm kind of glad they've included the jukebox musicals in a way, just because otherwise everybody would be using the same 8 or so pieces of music. But again, pick them carefully.
Yeah.
Pick them carefully, folks, because some of them aren't very well recorded.
Actually, feel free to, avoid names if you don't feel comfortable, but are you working on any ice dance programs for the season currently, or do you plan to be in the near future?
I am. I've done about a dozen or so far, and I've got a dozen or so on the schedule at the moment for the next couple of weeks. And they've been a pretty entertaining bunch. There's one or two I'm not supposed to talk about. But
of course, understood.
Speaking, there's some good stuff. There's what have we had? We've had really obscure choices, which I kind of like.
That's exciting.
That's what we like to hear.
Yeah, exactly.
It's good.
As long as nobody's using Shrek.
Yes, that was on our band list.
Yeah, there's obscure but good, and there's obscure but Shrek.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I defy anybody to use certain ones. Please, think twice about like Spamalot and stuff like that.
I mean,
I would take Spamalot before I would take Shrek.
At least it's intentionally silly.
Yeah.
And meant to be ridiculous.
That's true.
I could see, I don't know if there's a song from it, but I could go with, we had a moment, Tim Coletto, the ice dancer, was mentioning on Twitter, joking that he was going to state to SpongeBob SquarePants. We had a moment of thinking, is the theme song at the right tempo? It's not.
It's not. We checked. But in our mass prediction that it's going to be mostly Fred and Ginger, I would take a SpongeBob.
Yeah, exactly.
One.
Definitely.
One.
Definitely. Just one. Just one.
Just for spice.
And then,
just to liven things up.
Absolutely.
So if you're looking at our playlists and you see that there's not a whole lot of Fred and Ginger, it's because we're trying to find stuff that's not Fred and Ginger that you can use. Because
absolutely, SpongeBob and Ginger.
Yeah. That'd be an interesting mix.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be good. I think that could work. Yeah, I keep waiting for somebody to commission me to do the rhythm dance from like Earth Girls Are Easy or something like that, but it continues strangely to not arrive. I don't understand.
Actually, speaking of silly, ridiculous, do you have a favorite ridiculous piece of music you've had to arrange for someone before?
Oh, that's a tough one. There have been so many. God, I think the ones that really. I mean, there are some that come in that are just crazy and clearly intend to be.
Yeah.
And I really like those. Those are just such a ball to work on. Most of them come from Carol Lane.
It makes sense.
I don't think anybody's going to be surprised by that.
Yeah.
No. Constant pipeline of borderline insane music choices that are just a joy. But there are, I mean, the other ones, the flip of that coin, I suppose, is the ones that come in where it's kind of, we've got this sort of beautiful Gaelic folk version of You Lift Me Up, and we want to join it with this sort of techno version of You Lift Me Up. Can you please splice these together? Because our previous editor couldn't do it.
Do you get many of the sort of really old-fashioned skating programs with, quick piece, slow piece, quick piece, with no, just these three pieces?
Yeah.
And they have nothing to do with each other.
Constantly. Yeah. I've learned to the way I think about dealing with those is I put my synchro head on, because in synchro, I mean, for most skating programs, my job is to make the joins as unobtrusive as possible and to make it feel like it's one piece and it flows naturally out of one into the next. And I've got pretty good at that, but every so often something comes in that's just so frighteningly weird that you have to put your synchro head on instead, because in synchro it's not about that at all. It's about okay, so we've got this transition between these two pieces of music which is weird and angular and doesn't quite fit, so let's make it bigger. Let's put explosions on it, let's add
shattering glass,
extra stuff, and let's really make it a feature, make it a feature of the program and make an accent happen there that they can choreograph against.
Yeah, that's an interesting way of doing things. Maybe more, single skaters should go
I just
that way.
always think of the Stepanova and Buchan Shattering Glass where she does the big kick.
Oh, yes.
That was their hip-hop one? That was the blues.
So.
Yeah, that was the blues.
Yes. Yeah.
It's like if you're going to go for a terrible music cut, throw Shattering Glass over it.
Yeah, just draw attention and make it interesting choreographically.
Yes.
Absolutely. I am constantly building up my library of smashing glass samples, and
I'm sure it comes in handy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whooshes and swooshes and explosions and all sorts of stuff like that. Definitely. You can hide a multitude of sins under an explosion.
Wow. So we have been going quite a long time. We should probably let you go here. Unless there's a...
It's been a blast. And I must say, though, also thank you for the fact I am the first guest. I'm completely bowled over by that. Well, it's an honor. Thank you very much.
This has been very exciting. And your insight has been super helpful for us and hopefully for the skaters who are listening.
Yes, definitely.
And also for the fans.
Anytime you want me to come back and...
well, we might have to take you up on that.
Yeah.
talk about whatever nonsense the ISU has in future for us.
Yeah, I will notice, interestingly enough, there was no mention at all of rhythms for the 2020-2021 season in the document. So we have no idea what's coming.
There's normally a little paragraph at the end, isn't there? And it just wasn't there.
I think they're trying to scare us because
or avoid criticism that they got and had to change their minds at the last minute. I assume
they're making interesting choices these days, particularly with the patterns. Which, if you want to hear about the patterns, that is coming.
Yes, and actually, just a quick note before we leave: if you have specific ice dance technical questions, send them now because we plan to address them shortly.
Yes. We tentatively have our next episode recording planned for approximately next weekend.
Yep.
So over the course of the next week, send us your ice dance technical questions.
Yes.
And we will try to explain them without video.
We'll see how it goes.
That's going to be fun.
Yeah, hopefully. Well, at least this one has gone very well. Obviously, this was a bit of an experiment for us since we're used to just talking to each other. But you have been excellent and
a wonderful addition to our two-person team.
Well, thank you. It's been a blast.
Well, do you want to sort of plug yourself if anybody's looking to hire a music editor? Where can they find you?
I think, if anybody's looking, it's theskatingmusicguy.com or I am Skating Music Guy on Twitter or Instagram. And if you type The Skating Music Guy into Facebook, you will probably find me. I think, that'll probably do it. If you can just, just hang fire a couple of days, though, because by golly, the next few days of this week are going to be busy with ice dance programs.
Yep. This is the busy time of year, for sure.
Yes.
Absolutely. But the more the merrier. Yep.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, and I guess we'll do our usual sign-off. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and please let us know your thoughts about This Week in Figure Skating at flutzescast@gmail.com. You can also follow us at Flutzescast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for even more skating content.
Check out our merch store on redbubble.com. Search for Flutzescast. And if you like what we do, consider leaving us a review wherever you're listening. We'll be back next week with more ice dance stuff, but until then, keep a watchful eye out for those Flutzes and Waxels skating fans.